In this section, we're going to be converting fractions to decimals. Remember that fractions are rational numbers. All right, the root word of rational is ratio, and a ratio looks like a fraction. So if you can turn a number into a fraction, then it's a rational number. The numerator and denominator of the fraction must be whole, meaning that your fraction can't have fractions in it or decimals in it. The numerator and the denominator have to be whole. And the denominator of your fraction is not allowed to equal 0, all right, because then you would be dividing by 0, which is undefined. A fraction also represents a division problem. All right, to convert a fraction to a decimal, we will use long division, just like we did when we were dividing with decimals. The answer to these division problems will always be decimals that repeat in a pattern or decimals that terminate, which means that they will stop. Okay, any decimal that repeats in a pattern forever is rational, and any decimal that stops or terminates is also rational. Okay, so let's see if we can convert some fractions into decimals using our long division. In example number 1, they would like us to convert the fraction 7/8 into a decimal. So I am going to set up my long division, and when I do this, my numerator is my dividend, which is going to go inside of the long division box. My denominator, 8, is my divisor. All right, and my divisor is already whole, so I don't have to worry about moving decimal points at all. So all I'm going to do is my division. All right, 7 is the same as 7 and 0/10. So what I'm going to do is bring that decimal point straight up into the problem here. And now 8 can't go into 7, so I'm going to put a 0 there. But 8 does go into 70 8 times. 8 times 8 is 64. 70 minus 64 is 6. I'm going to add a 0 inside, and I'm going to bring it down. And now I need 8 to go into 60. 8 does go into 60 7 times. 8 times 7 is 56. 60 minus 56 is 4. I'll again add a 0 and bring it down. 8 goes into 40 5 times. 5 times 8 is 40. 40 minus 40 is 0. And now I've reached the end of the problem. All right. So the fraction 7/8 is equal to the decimal 875 thousandths. This is an example of a terminating decimal, and it's a terminating decimal because the decimal stops. All right, so if you set up your long division and eventually you get a remainder of 0 here, that means your decimal is going to terminate. All right, so this 7/8 is equal to 875 thousandths, which again is a terminating decimal. In example number 2, we're going to convert the fraction 11/15 to a decimal, again using long division. All right, so I'm going to set up my long division box here. And again, my dividend is 11, that's my numerator. And my divisor is 15. The divisor is already whole, so I don't have to worry about moving any decimal places. 11 is the same as 11 and 0/10. So this is where the decimal moves straight up. And 15 does not go into 11 at all. Okay, but we do know that 15 will go into 110. All right, 110, 15 rather, goes into 110 6 times. All right, 7 times. That was my mistake. 15 goes into 110 7 times. All right, 7 times 15 is 105. And if I do 110 minus 105, I'm left with 5. Let's add a 0 and bring it down. 15 goes into 50 3 times. All right, 3 times 15 is 45. And when I subtract, I'm left with 5. We'll add a 0 and we'll bring it down. 15 again goes into 50 3 times, which was 45. Our difference again is 5. Add a 0 and bring it down. And there's that 50 again. 15 goes into 53 times. And I think we see what's happening. All right. So our fraction 11/15 is going to be equal to the decimal 73 hundredths, but the 3 is repeating. Okay, so again, right here in the hundredths place is where our decimal begins to repeat. So I'm only going to put a bar over that 3 right there. Okay, only put a bar over the 3 because the 7 does not repeat. 11/15 equals 73 hundredths with the 3 repeating. And this is an example of a repeating decimal because the decimal repeats in a pattern forever. Okay, if we were to continue this long division, we would keep getting 50 minus 45, 50 minus 45, on and on forever. So this is an example of a repeating decimal. Terminating decimals, and we learned how to write those as fractions. Remember that when you change a terminating decimal into a fraction, you need to first say it. Okay, say the decimal out loud properly. This means that 0 and 34 hundredths is 34 hundredths and not 0.34. Okay, so make sure that you know how to say your decimals properly. If you can say the decimal properly after you say it, then you can write it. By saying the decimal out loud, we know that the furthest right place value. In the example above, it's hundredths. Okay, so right here we go to the hundredths place. Now write 34 hundredths as a fraction, 34 over 100. Once you say it and then you write it, the last thing that you need to do is simplify it. Okay, if possible, simplify the fraction into lowest terms. In our example, 34 and 100 are both divisible by 2, which creates the simplified fraction of 17/50ths. And since it will not simplify further, we know that 34 hundredths is equal to the fraction of 17/50ths. So now that we've reviewed how to write a terminating decimal as a fraction, let's go ahead and practice that. Write each terminating decimal, as a fraction in simplest form or as a mixed number. Okay, so here's our first decimal, and again, we're going to say it properly. It's not 0.8, right? The 8 is in the tenths place, so this is called 8 tenths. So I'm going to write it as the fraction 8 over 10. 8 tenths, 8 tenths. And now I'm going to simplify it. The numerator and the denominator are each divisible by 2. So that's going to simplify the fraction down to 4/5. Okay, right underneath of that. All right, again, this is not 0.02. The 2 is in the hundredths place, so this is called 2 hundredths. So I'm going to write my fraction as 2 over 100. And now I'll simplify. Both the numerator and the denominator are divisible by 2, which makes the fraction 1/50th. In our next our next decimal, 3 and 25 hundredths. So this is going to be a mixed number where the whole number is 3, and then 25 hundredths, 25 over 100. Okay, now when I simplify this, I'm still going to have 3 as my whole part, and then 25 100ths. They're both divisible by 25, which creates the fraction 1/4. 3 and 1/4. Or if you change that to just a fraction, this is going to be the same as 13/4. Finally, 5 and 44 hundredths. So again, another mixed number. 5 and 44 over 100. 5 and 44 hundredths. I'll divide the numerator and the denominator here by 4. By 4, which is going to be 5 and 11/25. In simplest form as a mixed number. As a fraction, 25 times 5 is 125. 125 plus 11 is 136/25. So again, to write a terminating decimal as a fraction, say it, write it, and then simplify it.